Ladies and gents, coming at you from Ronaville 2020, it's the GKTECH S13 S14 S15 bolt-on angle kit, aka the roll center correction kit, aka the RCCK. This kit allows you to keep your stock knuckle without cutting or welding to get that dank angle we're all after on the cheap. This is a box like we always show, but it's what's inside that counts, and in this case you get some studly stud type shanks as well as the steel roll center correction bodies. Those include 2 tie rod adjustment points at no extra charge. You also get a set of handy instructions with torque specs in case you missed this dope video. Let's chat about those studly stud shanks I mentioned earlier. The one on the left is the ball joint shank, and the one on the right is the tie rod end shank that comes with a small cone that I'll explain in a little bit. These do need a bit of pre-assembly, so thread the ball joint shank onto the main body, then the tie rod shank in as well. One is much larger than the other, so it should be a square peg round hole situation. Don't mess it up. Now imagine a world, if you will, full of options. Options like being able to choose the tie rod end pickup point at will. Amazing, right? Right. As you can see here, there are 2 positions. The position on the left is for you grippy boys out there. It gives you 40 mil bump steer correction, 40 mil roll center correction, and is the furthest position from the ball joint. Got it? The glory hole on the right is the drift position, and it has faster steering, lower ackerman, and the all-important max lock that comes with the old drift hole. I want to emphasize that the kit can be fitted on the car, but for better demonstration, we're taking the whole damn thing off and doing it on the bench. For example, start by removing the tie rod from the boring as stock knuckle. Remove the nuts needed for your particular setup and pop the shank out of the knuckle. Then head over to the ball joint nut and remove the split pin, then the nut, then give her a tappy tap and pop it on loose. Head up and remove the 2 caliper bolts and hang that thing safely somewhere. Now remove both of the strut nuts and bolts and remove the entire knuckle assembly. Take the assembly to the bench and fit the eccentric cone to the tie rod end shank. Now the cone is eccentric by design, so don't freak out. We've done that so there's a perfect fit between the ball joint and the tie rod end shank. Start by fitting the nuts to both of the shanks, then you want to make sure the main body sits flush up against the OEM knuckle as shown here. Your goal is to have the main body sitting flush and the taper fully seated inside the OEM knuckle. To do so, hold the main body against the knuckle and wind the shank all the way in. You notice it will start to separate just a little, and that's fine. Just back the shank off a bit until it's perfect in the taper and the body is sitting flush and pretty. Do this for both the tie rod end shank and the ball joint shank, and when the tapers are both sitting at 100% where they need to be and the main body is flush with the knuckle, you can head on over to the tie rod end side, hold the bottom and tighten the nut down, then move over to the ball joint stud and tighten the nut all the way down, then finally torque to the specs shown on the screen. Now, head back over to the tie rod end nut and torque to these specs whilst supporting the bottom as well. Make sure it's regular flush and that the cones are seated all the way before reinstalling. Now toss your knuckle back onto the coilover bracket and tighten the nuts and bolts that hold it on. Then torque to these specs shown right here. Pop the caliper you so gingerly hung up on earlier and thread and tighten, then torque the 2 bolts to these specs shown on the screen. Now head down and pop in the ball joint to the roll center correction kit, then install the nut and tighten. Now once again, torque to the specs shown on the screen. Now install the tie rod end shank from the bottom to the top, then install the nut. Torque down to these specs shown right here and make sure this is seated properly first. Install the top shims, then the bottom shims, and finally zap on that bottom nut, then torque to the specs shown on the screen. Go get an alignment, and you're now set to drift, my guy. Enjoy. This is us. Please subscribe. We're nothing without you, I promise. If you can't install these, have a pro do it or reach out with any questions. This has been Officer Dan, Johnny Caps, and what color should I paint my car, Zach, with another GKTECH How To. Peace.